Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking about contamination OCD today, which is a topic that I haven't done for a long time, and I thought I would come on here because I wanted to run through it all in complete detail about the whole process of what's involved with contamination OCD. First thing, obviously, I'm using a tripod, which is something that people have been recommending to me for a while, often doing them, holding them. So it's a lot easier on my neck because I've got a herniated disc in my neck, so it's not always the best thing to do. So that has been an adjustment that I needed to make for a while. I wanted to talk. I don't want to do question and answer format because I want to give a full focus on contamination OCD today, because it's a type of it's just OCD in general. It's not a type of OCD. It's just how OCD operates, and it's one that I suffered from specifically myself. And I wanted to really go through in detail about that. So I won't be covering questions on here today. I'll be really going into contamination OCD. So the first thing that is what happens with contamination OCD is it can often start very quickly. So for myself, I was around the age of about 17, and it started with HIV-related OCD, so fear of contracting HIV. So that OCD fear came on from unprotected sex on a one-night stand scenario where I was then absolutely convinced I had HIV. Okay, now that can start as health OCD in itself without an outward compulsion, so with a contamination related. But what it did is it linked the contamination to that fear, that specific fear. So before that point, in my mind, you wouldn't have noticed any OCD, nothing particularly out of the ordinary. Had I been working with myself at 16, I would have been able to spot, this guy, is going to be developing OCD by all the other traits that spot. But to the average person, family and friends wouldn't spot it. So this video today is also for family and friends who have a loved one going through contamination OCD, so you can understand about what it's like that they're going through. Okay, so then when it started, it first of all was like, what if I'd got HIV, developed with a health OCD basis of me being scared of me putting myself at risk, putting the hyper responsibility that's attached with OCD, being in a more dangerous situation, being in a position where I could potentially die or affect my life, and social sort of ideas of being not accepted as a partner and so on, if that was the case. So there's all that going on. There was that situation that was happening, and then what it did is it linked very subtly, because it just comes in subtly usually of how it links it together. Just was washing my hands in the bathroom. It's not going to create a link there because there's nothing to link HIV. It has to. It basically draws up all the dots OCD, so it links loads of risks together. So what it would do is then, after using the toilet, for example, it would go, what if you somehow contaminated the toilet to then infect someone else? So it created a link between the toilet to HIV. That's what it did, just very subtly in a thought. But it doesn't do that with OCD. In people, it does that in OCD, but it doesn't do that in people without OCD. They might have that thought, but it doesn't create that link. Then it creates a real fight or flight. This is real danger. You could have put someone at risk. Then you've got the chronic guilt cycle that's starting. So you've got the chronic guilt cycle that starts, as well as the chronic anxiety cycle that the individual's then scared that they've done something that's put someone at risk, and they've got to take more responsibility now. So then it will be washing their hands over and over. Maybe it will be cleaning the toilet to ensure that no one else contracts something. And this, in a period of a few weeks, went from 0 to washing for about 6 hours a day, going through every shampoo bottle in the house and every hand gel bottle in the house for a period of months, just like that, suddenly, bang. And I was completely locked in that cycle. Now, let's have a look at where that starts. We're going to go through every single part of it in a real amount of detail, because I often see it lacking online, and I think I've always thought, well, I want to do a contamination video that really goes into this. So what happens is I'm going to put together a whole lot of steps of how the process works, not not relating to myself, but in relation to people that have contamination OCD, how it links together, okay? Some of the stages I myself got caught in, but this isn't relating to myself, it's just to give an understanding of how these things can link. So first thing is, if a human being uses a toilet that hasn't got OCD and it hasn't created this link, they'd obviously just use the toilet, touch the flush, go and wash their hands, 10 seconds, out the door, and off they go. OCD creates this link. So what it does is it goes, they'll use the toilet, they'll get up, and then it might go, well, you've touched your belt to do up your trousers, so therefore there's a risk of contamination from the toilet to your belt. So then it instantly brings your awareness suddenly to how can anyone ever do up their trousers? How dirty are other people's trousers who haven't done this, been in this similar situation? Who everyone's in this similar situation, but how can other people not worry about this? Then the confusion feeling of how will I ever understand this? Why am I so stuck? Why? Actually, I will cover questions in relation to this contamination video. So if you want to ask questions specific to this contamination video, please do so at the bottom, but it's only going to be on contamination topic. And I'll answer these at the end. So then what they'll do is they will then be lost. What do I do? How do I know? What do other people do? Feeling confused. Oh my God, what if I put someone at risk? Responsibility, all of that lock up there, that cycle. Then they will go to the flush on the toilet. They'll touch that. They'll think that I used the toilet, but I've touched the flush before washing hands. They'll think, how does anyone do this? This must mean this toilet flush is always contaminated. I should have to wash that flush after I've washed my hands, but then I'll recontaminate. And now they're caught in this great maze, this maze-like web of stuck with fear of all of this going on. And they're very much stuck in that. And it's a very frightening position because for the onlooker who doesn't understand this, it's like being trapped in a web internally. And it's very tiring. I mean, when I was in this sort of cycle of going through this, you know, it was like a full-time job and it was like being in prison in your head. It was very, very hard. And so then what will happen is they'll then go to, say, to the tap, for example. They'll turn on the tap. They'll pour water on the tap to clean the tap because they think the tap handle is then contaminated for the next person. Then they'll wash their hands. They'll spend ages. Then it will end up washing all the way up their arm. Obviously, I'm working with people with contamination OCD from where it's affecting their life a bit to where it's affecting their life drastically. So people will be washing all up their arm all the time. Some people will be using cleaning chemicals on their arms, on their whole body, getting in the shower after using the toilet. All variations of this and far, far beyond that. Then there's all the avoidance things to even avoid the scenario in different ways. So many different elements. But at the core, all it is fear of fear, and fear of being stuck forever scared, fear of infecting somebody. So fear of being stuck forever scared in that sort of trapped web, not being able to get out of that. Fear of infecting somebody and being responsible and feeling chronic guilt and anxiety forever. That's another part of that. Then what you've got is they are fear of forgetting things, fear of missing up the steps, fear of getting trapped in it and not being able to get back to the position they were. There's so much things going on in that sort of fear of fear cycle, fear of contamination and so on, which obviously can relate to them, fear of them getting it, fear of it passing on. So then they've done the taps, then they've finished, turned off taps, right? Now, here is a crucial point for all OCD sufferers. When you walk away from something and you're about to leave something, OCD turns up the heat, hence why you're going on holiday. It tells you as you're walking out the door, it gives you the feeling, the real feeling often, the absolute reality that you have definitely forgotten your passport or something's going to ruin your holiday. You're not going to stop thinking about forgetting your passport the whole holiday and it's going to be ruined and vice versa. So it's going to do that, right? So when you leave the bathroom, it's going to then say, no, you definitely didn't turn off the tap, or you definitely didn't. If you have a fear of maybe flooding the house, that would be not relating to contamination, but harm. They will interlink. Fear of, okay, maybe you have definitely contaminated someone, put them at risk and forgotten about it. It will tell you did it on purpose. It will do all of that because it's trying to get in there to get your attention as you're moving on. So that cycle is never going to be enough. Okay, so you'll be, especially with myself, when I was using hand gel, it would be like, use hand gel, washed, maybe I missed a bit on my hand, keep washing to get that feeling. Then you've got the just right OCD. Did I get that feeling just right? If not, I've got to wash again and again, and it will never give you that feeling. Did I put the shampoo bottle down? Did that then touch a surface? Was that bit contaminated? It will give you a feeling that was contaminated. You can imagine the mental sort of trouble that the individual's getting into now at this point. It's doing that. Oh, you missed that part. Oh, you missed your elbow. It feels like the elbow wasn't done. Vice versa. All of that just going back and forth, all in that cycle. Same with the use of the toilet. People will have how they use the toilet, tissue paper on the toilet, all to do with cleaning. Now, this may seem to somebody who hasn't got OCD, they think, how on earth does someone get into that situation? Why can't they just leave? It's obviously, when you think about it, not as simplistic as that. The same as someone who's got an eating disorder just doesn't just go, oh, I've eaten enough, or I should eat, and it's simple as that. It ain't as simple as that, okay? In the brain, with OCD, you've got a fight or flight response. It's telling you, and it's also very good at mimicking and making things feel real. To that individual, it feels absolutely 100% their whole life is at risk imminently now. If they don't do that, their whole future and happiness is at risk if that is not completed. That whole process is going on there, okay? Now, on top of that, the person is feeling extremely isolated from everyone because they're now in this web that's very separate to other people. And this has got many layers to this. This could link to, if you don't do this correctly, you don't go to sleep. If you don't do this correctly, you can't do this. And so very quickly their life's been hijacked. And to everyone else, they're thinking, Jesus, this is so over the top, but they can't see what's going on there with that fight or flight, life or death struggle. Yes, I'll be saving this live. This will be going onto YouTube as a contamination video. So you've got that going on. Now, in relation to, obviously, the way to get better, but is not obvious initially because the person can't see this until they understand that, is they need to cut out these compulsions and feel the discomfort of chronic guilt and anxiety bit by bit, sort of hierarchy-like way, as well as understanding sort of unconditional self-life acceptance, so accepting themselves even if they did contaminate someone or contaminate themselves, and all of that to get under that. So that's the process we're going through, as well as with uncertainty. And what's happening is, for me, it was very much because it felt so real all the time. You always were absolutely convinced that this time it's real, this time it's different, this time your life, you must take attention to this one. The other one now feels like the OCD, but this particular one now is real. This one is urgent. This one needs dealing with. And that's very much where I was, stuck, 17 years old. It comes on out of nowhere, no understanding of OCD or anything. For myself, I managed to cut out all those compulsions in a period of months. I was in a pretty bad way at that point, but then it's still hijacked then to health OCD and moved on. Now, for different people, it's different. It's got no different. Everyone's journey is different. Okay, there's no judgment on journeys. People come into me who've been stuck with this issue for 20 years. People come into me that have been stuck with this for 3 weeks. It's not easy when you don't know what you're doing. And when you do know what you're doing, it takes persistence and hard work. People don't realise that people tackling contamination OCD, this is a bloody hard thing that they're facing, when to them it feels like absolute life and death. You've got to imagine you're facing life and death scenario in your head, and you're having to overcome that. It's just connected to those things. So it's difficult. It's very difficult at first, but it gets easier. It's bumpy up and down as we move towards recovery. And it's the feeling of confusion. Have I gone too far? What if I've pushed it too far and put someone at risk? All these versions. What if by my exposure I've taken myself too far and I get too anxious and I stay anxious and locked in an anxious cycle forever? It's all of these elements that are going on. And it can link to anything. These things can branch out into so many variations that people don't initially spot. So you might have somebody who's scared of contamination in relation to HIV, for example, and they're in the shower, in the bathroom, and then they've noticed that there's some mold in the shower. Now they've got convinced that they've contracted mold or passed it on to someone else, and then they're looking for areas of mold in the bathroom that could lead to that. Or maybe cleaning products, did they use the right one? Could they have given someone an allergy by using a different one, or forgetting one? Or should they use stronger cleaning products because soap doesn't do it for this particular thing they're scared of? Whatever. It's a vicious cycle, and learning a lot about the rational areas of the fear that I was stuck with, which was particularly fear of HIV, was learning about the risks, seeing things like, which we don't do over-analysis on, but having a bit of an understanding is good. In general population, we obviously have to advise people to be careful of HIV, because in the general public, people will go and take a lot of risks. with an OCD sufferer who's stuck in that cycle, they're linking everything to they've definitely contracted HIV. But HIV, for example, is about a 1 in 2,000 contraction for a male on sexual intercourse with them contracting it from a known HIV partner. For women, I think it's something 1 in 200, and then different risks for different sexual acts and so on. And so when you're looking at that risk of 1 in 2,000, OCD makes it feel like if you just do something wrong with the tap, you're going to give someone HIV. Well, it's not as simplistic as that by any means, but it does that. It links all that together. So having a rough idea of how things work helps bring down that fear. The same as with COVID, learning that it's not as simplistic as just a sudden tap for a millisecond and contraction. It's not as simplistic as that. And obviously COVID brought in a huge other problem for people with OCD, because then everything feels like they're putting their family at risk. They're killing people by one mistake with a touch. So contamination OCD has been very difficult for people with COVID. We've had a huge number of people coming in with COVID related OCD, and it's been very difficult. Their whole may have been recovered for years and then been thrown off course completely by this COVID situation. So it's not so easy. Now, with that risk, with those risks that you've got there that are all at play in relation to HIV and so on, you have other things like, what if you've cut your finger, so therefore you could have got blood from something? What if I'm just doing the bathroom environment, I'm not doing food and passing on things to people's food and so on, because that's a whole other area of contamination. There'll be lots of these videos on this section. In a bathroom, it might be someone's razor. What if they had HIV and I contracted it? What if I touched it and gave it to them? What if... What other things in the bathroom tend to be a problem? Light switches, leaving the bathroom, door handle in the bathroom, washing, soaping the door handle. All these things. It very quickly gets a grip on all these things, very fast. So that's the initial cycle that you're seeing going on there with contamination OCD, which is about getting comfortable with the discomfort, feeling those sensations of chronic guilt and anxiety, not trying to be rid of them instantly, whilst working on acceptance bit by bit, step by step, that gets under it overall. Let's have a look at some of these questions for the moment. So questions relating to contamination OCD specifically, I will be answering now on here. So if you want to send those across. It's always going to go to worst case scenario most of the time. It tries to link the dots. If it just went to something subtle, you'd be able to get out the disorder very quickly, because it would just bring up something that you could easily override. So it's always going to the thing that you can't override. Hence why people are like, well, why am I stuck on this? Why did it pick this? Well, it knows that you're scared of this. That's why it's gone for that. One of my most profound subjects right now, as in blood, semen, body fluids. Yep, that's the kind of stuff it's going for. And it will link sensations to that too. Feeling yucky, disgust in relation to those things. I'll feel disgust all the time if I feel that or know that touch, that or this. And so there's a lot of that going on too. You can't just not care about OCD. You need to show the brain that it doesn't need to care. It's not just, you can't just tell yourself accept or don't care. Those sort of loose statements don't really get much grip. Someone has just said, nice haircut. That actually relates to OCD for a lot of people. When you have contamination OCD, people have often the fear of, what if my hair's too long? Then I could get contamination from myself, or it could catch something, or if it's too dirty and then it's touched something, that can be a fear for people as well. Contamination OCD can get into anything. What if I cut my hair and I had this wrong feeling? Or what if I shaved in the bathroom and then that hair had some contamination that did something else? Whatever, it can link to anything. I used to actually have OCD in relation to hair when I was younger. If my hair wasn't positioned how I thought it was, I thought I wouldn't be accepted. And it sounds so crazy now when I think about it. But at the time, it created that sensation. What if your hair wasn't, then you wouldn't be interpreted? That's where it initially started, about 14 years old. That was only around the period of about 14 to 15, and then it went. But it really got in there, spending hours doing my hair just to do that, just completely to do with a feeling of shame. And it seems so bizarre now, but then it really had its grip. Using tissues for the toilet flush. Yeah, using tissues in all of that environment, cleaning of towels, all kinds of different things, different types of tissues, all of those areas it tries to get into. I have this with regards to spreading. As you know, I occasionally think, what if a drop of a positive culture got onto my sleeve and I put others at risk? I get into this a lot of the time. Yeah, it can link to anything, viruses, bathroom, just the general bathroom setting, fluids, anything like that. It can link to. It can link to anything. Yeah, just again for that, am I saving this live? Yep, this is going to be on YouTube. This will be updated today in a bit. We'll be doing a lot of videos on this. Well, I'll be doing a lot of videos on this contamination section. I'm going to be going through all different OCD fears, talking about them in great detail. You know, it's been like with me writing this book. You know, it's just, I could write 5 chapters on just tiny sections, because I've lived with this condition. I lived with OCD. I still have OCD, but it doesn't affect my life at all. But I'm saying, when I did, it's so many years and years and years, and obviously been working for over a decade, thousands of people with OCD. There's so much to be said about different types of OCD, different, not types, it's all OCD is the same, but different things it latches to. So there's a lot to speak about, and I want to cover all those areas and produce as much free content as we can to help people all around the world who are struggling from that, so they understand how it's operating, to help themselves to recover. And on every section, there's so many things on each section that we can talk about that often get missed. The OCD is spoken about very broadly usually, so we want to get into all those areas and look at that. Any tips on how to work with sitting with that feeling? Well, the feeling is very uncomfortable, yes, but the feeling does come down. And if it doesn't subside, we pick away at it. We sort of chip away at it with the unconditional self and life acceptance to really get under it. So that does that, but that takes a while to sort of to embody, to feel, to believe, to really experience that. So you're not going to be able to do that overnight. So you've got to treat OCD recovery like a marathon, not a sprint. It's not something you're going to suddenly have all grasped right this second. It's going to take a bit of time. You're going to work through this bit by bit, and you're going to get there. But don't expect instant fix right now. You've got to chip away at it. We don't answer all the questions on the Instagram live, because obviously there's a lot of questions, so I just try and cover the main ones. A lot of the broad ones I can't cover, but I just try and get through as many as I can. So I think the main thing that you want to be thinking about when you're approaching contamination OCD, and this is something that I really thought about to sort of show to people how it's got a grip on their life. You've got to look, when you recover, you look back at the time you lost to it. So you look back at the years you were lost, you were stuck in the struggle. What it does very sneakily, OCD, is it steals your time, and it keeps you stuck in a compulsion, because it feels like life and death. So to you, you're only focused on getting out of this life and death scenario, but you're missing what you're missing. Now, acceptance comes in here too, learning to accept what we missed. I call it the so-called lost years, all the years I was stuck in OCD. But then obviously the Viktor Frankl book, Man's Search for Meaning, played a great part, learning to see that was what paved the way to changing my life, changing my perspectives on everything. So they weren't lost years, they were years that were challenging, but they empowered me into developing how I think now. What you need to think about is, when you're engaging in compulsions, you are sacrificing your life and time, okay? It's holding you hostage, it's holding you prisoner. Nothing warrants holding us prisoner like that. It's always going to tell you, no, this is so serious, someone's going to die because of this, so it has to. But you're always trading that. You're always trading all your time, all your quality of life for the one-off risk. You can't live like that. Nothing is worth being trapped. Nothing is worth being trapped all your life. It's like if someone said there's a trade, okay, you can keep that person alive, but you've got to be tortured for the rest of your life. Nothing would be worth being tortured the rest of your life. Okay? So you've got to take that risk. You've got to take that risk that if you're stuck in something, being tortured all the time, you have a choice. You do not need to do these compulsions as much as your brain is screaming it. You are partaking in that exchange with OCD, that if I do this, then something will be prevented, or something will be made the way you want it to be made, but you are sacrificing all of the others for that, all the other quality of life and so on. So you really want to focus on that point. Yes, to watch this video, the whole video, and there's going to be a lot of other contamination videos in different sections on this channel, go onto our YouTube channel, OCD Recovery YouTube channel, and it will be uploaded in the next hour, and you can watch the whole thing there. All right, guys, I will see you on Instagram Live probably in the next few days, and I will be covering most likely the next part of this contamination OCD, or going on to another OCD topic and then coming back to that. All right, guys, I will see you soon. Thanks a lot. Take it easy.